Welcome to the RaceGuru Thunder Hour. I'm your co-host, Rich Maletto, with Sean Engel, and here we are to talk more NASCAR. Be sure to check us out on fantasyguru.com and take full advantage of the special promotion on the MVP Game Time All-In package. That includes NHL, NBA, PGA, soccer, racing, horse racing. Man, I'm going to forget something, but it's $74.99. That gets you 12 months. That gets you all the DFS, all the sports betting on all of those things except for football, baseball, and March Madness. Everything else is included. Sign up now. Don't delay. Take full advantage of it while you can. I'm sure that pricing will go away sooner than later. Sean, happy Thunder Hour. I don't know what else to call it, man. I was going to say happy RaceGuru Thunder Hour, but happy Thunder Hour. What's going on, my friend?
We can just say it's Thunder time, my friend. We're going to get right on into it, man. We're bringing home the Thunder. We just got past the desert race at Phoenix. Here we go. We got, funny enough, Thunder is a perfect analogy for this show.
Yeah.
We're in Thunder Valley this weekend, Bristol. So there you go.
Right. I was going to say, and we're headed to Thunder Valley. So, you know. Well, before we get too into Bristol this weekend, which I can't lie, you're going to have to hold me back, Sean. I'm excited to be back on the concrete, and we'll talk about that. But let's delve into Phoenix a little bit. That was the first time we got the short track package out there. So I'm sure we got some thoughts on that. It's a unique track. There are no other tracks on the circuit like it, right? So what all did you take away from this weekend's racing? We didn't have trucks. We had Xfinity and we had Cup.
Yep, that is correct. Ultimately, the big thing that I saw was it still wasn't that drastically different from other Phoenix races in the past. But what I will say is that it does allow that if you truly have the car, like say if you had like the number 20 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota of Christopher Bell, for example, you actually can really move through the field and just fly on by.
What I took away from that was we were both all in on Bell, right? And there's no secret to the success, right? It was all over the practice times. It was all over on the consecutive practice times. If anything, it was Joey Logano's consecutive practice times that really threw us off because he went nowhere, right? So while Bell didn't qualify necessarily up front, we were on him. What I found interesting, though, for starting in 6th place and having 16th place and having as good of a car as he did, Sean, it took a long time for him to get into the top 5.
Yeah, it sure did. He definitely had the car to do it, and he had to rely on that long run speed because that really was the big difference as far as how he was able to get by all those cars. Like once the tire wear was kicking in and the cars were sliding around, that's when he was really making moves and advancing to the front pretty quickly. But it seemed to be that when everybody was on equal tires, it was still a little tricky to pass.
And really the only car we really saw go from back to forefront couple of times was Bell. Everybody else either maintained or used strategy, like poor Mark Truex. If they had caught in a caution, I think Mark Truex wins that race on sheer strategy, which was we're going to get him up front and hold on to what we had. They were 5 laps short of fuel, and so it bit them when the race stayed green flag. But I'll be honest, Sean, I am for as much hype as we heard about the changes with the package and what we were going to see. And I'm very disappointed in NASCAR spouting some sort of number of 2,318 passes or 2,813 passes. You didn't see it watching, man. I mean, Bell was literally about the only example. There was a couple other guys that came up a little bit. Reddick worked his way a little bit. But here again, we had that late stop, and he got, jammed up back there in traffic. Gibbs did a little bit, right? He kind of was impressive at times. Similar equipments, all with Joe Gibbs. But beyond that, I didn't see what we were sold we were going to get to see with this new race package.
But, funny enough, you mentioned about Gibbs, you mentioned Hamlin, you mentioned Reddick, and then we mentioned Bell. I think this also goes back to the fact of the matter was that Toyota was really the big manufacturer of this past weekend. And those cars were just advancing through the field more than the other manufacturers. You even saw Hamlin kind of move his way through the field at times. He even came back to eventually finish around the top 10 or so. So that Also what was surprising too a little bit was Chevrolet. They did not really they got bit by the strategy. I know that was a good part of that whole deal, but they've only had one single car finish inside the top 10 with Ross Chastain. So it's crazy, especially when you consider that the best Chevrolet for a good amount of the race was surprisingly, you could say almost, Chase Elliott.
Right. And Larson was the one that showed speed in practice. And the funny thing about Chase was he just kind of was hanging around. Him and Truex both were just kind of hanging around Martin traffic, not really doing anything, but they were one of the either guys were falling off and going backwards, and some of the guys were able to inch their way up to gain a couple of spots, other than like we said, Gibbs and Bell and Hamlin to some degree. Truex, when the tire wear came in, he did a little bit when he got up into the top 5. It's all Joe Gibbs, though. I mean, we didn't even see much with Reddick, and we definitely didn't see it for Bubba Wallace. Joey Logano's the one that just completely baffled me, because between the practice times, the consecutive lap average practice times, he never went anywhere. Like, the Ford guys were the ones we were talking offline, so to speak, but we were talking about, it's kind of interesting. It seemed like the Ford guys were more excited about what they had, yet we didn't see it. And I don't know what's going on at Team Penske, because I know Cindric got in trouble early and that whole nonsense, but Blaney basically rode around in the top 10-ish most of the day. Logano, did he ever get out of 22nd place?
No, Logano just never really made it up through the field. Blaney, at the very least, he was able to climb his way into a top 5 finish, and he was one of the few Fords that actually was out there making moves towards the front. So, to be fair to him, he did actually have some speed. It's just he just did not get the right track position to compete with those Toyotas at the end there.
I'm more confused with Blaney's success and lack of success from the other two. When I was saying I don't know what's going on with Penske, because I agree. Blaney was probably the best Ford of the day, right? I don't know if he ended up finishing as the best Ford, but throughout the race, he consistently, like I said, 5th to 10th almost all day. He was somewhere in that range about the whole race. And Joey never moved anywhere. And he has a decent history there too, referencing Logano. So that was something that was a bit alarming, because unlike the other races where Joey was fast and got caught up in a wreck, and that's why he's so far back in the points, this was alarming I think he finished a lap down even.
Looking back at the results for Logano, well, he got involved in an accident later on in the race anyway, so he did not really get that far. So looking back on it, the Fords actually, if you want to talk about strong Ford performances that also got there based off the strategy, you got to look at RFK Racing, because both of their 2 cars finished in the top 5. So that's another big deal to that team too.
Well, and that team did well on the short tracks the last 2 years. Like, they couldn't make Daytona. They struggled 2 years ago, I'm talking about. They were really struggling to make races. Like, they were lacking overall speed to some ridiculous level. But they always kind of hung around in the short tracks, and we saw Chris Buescher win at Bristol last year on the short track. Their short track program seems to be in line, and it was a good strategy call, and shame on me, I did forget about them finishing. Here again, I was looking for guys coming through the field, and they did it by strategy. They never really, drove their way up. Buescher, you've got to be somewhat impressed with Buescher overall, though. He was not a big name when he came up from Trucks and Xfinity. I know I liked him. I believe you had talked about him early on as well. We knew he was going to kind of a weak team when that signing happened. At that time, that was before Brad was even there.
Yep.
But I'm impressed with, look, I think Brad did a great job. There's got to be good chemistry and info they're sharing between the 2 drivers, because they are definitely, of all the teams out there, hats off to Trackhouse, who, with this new car hit the floor running, right? But RFK has been in a battle. I mean, we talk about in fantasy rebuilding teams. They really were rebuilding, and they've been rebuilding with those 2 drivers. Mm-hmm. And it's getting to the point, Sean, that these are 2 names we're going to be talking about weekly.
Oh, for sure. Although what I will say about this, though, is I think between the 2 this weekend, I think Brad ended up having the better car between them. And Buescher, even though he finished second, a good part of that, I feel, was the strategy call, too. But what we also just also wanted to mention 2 other Ford drivers did finish inside the top 10, that being Michael McDowell and Chase Briscoe. So we got to shout out to them too, because they also had some pretty good performances this past weekend as well.
2 guys people weren't expecting to either, to be fair. I mean, we pushed Briscoe a fair amount because of his history there, but overall, those were not 2 names you were getting much talk or hear about, during pre-race or anything else. Well, enough about the Cup race. What did you think? You got to admit, the end of the Xfinity race was, I tell you what, my betting pocket and predictions really loved it, but boy, was I commented on it in the Discord. Like, I thought it was done and over with.
Yeah, exactly. I thought Allgaier had that locked up, and then boom, classic case of tire going down, and boom, he was in the wall. He had that race on lock, though.
He did. But here again, they talked about it. Be careful about wearing out the tires. He was battling early on with Chandler Smith because Chandler knew he had the better short run car, and he was trying to get up there and didn't get by. Justin did a great job protecting, but I got to wonder if he wore out his rear tires doing that, because it was the left rear, I believe it was, that popped as he was going down the straightaway.
Yep, that is correct. And although I will also say this about Chandler Smith, he's been really consistent to start out the Xfinity Series season. And he's been knocking on that door to a victory for the past couple of races. So I think it was only a matter of time before he was going to find his way into victory lane. And although the circumstances weren't exactly, let's put it this way, he kind of walked right into that win that time, but still, a win is a win.
In all fairness, he lost a couple last year where he dominated, and it was a late yellow flag on one of them, and I believe he ran out of fuel in another one. So I feel like he kind of got karma back this time because he's been on the other end of it, of giving it up. And I'm with you, Sean. Chandler Smith has been a staple in our conversations and our bets for the better part, probably almost, maybe not quite a year, but I mean, for trucks, for certainly, but as far as Xfinity goes, look, I like him coming up too, man. I think he's destined for a Cup ride sooner than later, and I think he earned that win all the same. Justin Allgaier gave it up, don't get me wrong, but Chandler Smith did earn that win as well, and I agree. He kind of lucked into it there at the end the way it worked out, but like I said, I think he's had one coming. We already kind of talked about the short track package. Do we want to talk about it some more, Sean? Do you have any more thoughts?
Well, the short track package overall regarding that, it actually is going to be a little bit before we see that again. I know last week we thought that Bristol this weekend was also going to use this package, but turns out that is not exactly the case, just to correct that from last week, because Bristol's using the intermediate rules package just because the track's layout and the corners being banked as much as they are.
I would say the higher speed bank. I mean, Bristol's a higher speed track than... Shouldn't say it's necessarily higher speed than Phoenix, because Phoenix is a mile. So I'm imagining top speeds are somewhat similar, but you're carrying a lot more momentum in at Bristol, and there's a lot more downforce. Phoenix, it's a flat track, so getting traction is a lot more difficult, where, at a place like Bristol, you get speeds into it, and that car just kind of sits down on the banking. So makes sense. That said, we are potentially using rain tires here at Bristol, which is not something they do at any intermediate tracks. I want to caution everybody, rain tires is a little bit of a misnomer, because if it's raining, unless it's a light mist, we're not going to be using the rain tires to go racing. It's more of to help speed up the process. If, we're getting kind of a mist, it's sprinkled over on this side of the track and it's kind of drying over here, and it's going to take us 2 hours to dry the track completely. Now the idea is we don't need to dry the track completely. When we feel like it's safe enough to go out there and race, we'll go out there and race. They'll have some defrosters or defoggers, I guess, in all the vehicles as well. I don't know if that's something new, because I don't remember seeing that before. They always had the Swiffer they were always using in the window.
Right.
But hey, they're calling for moisture this weekend, which is not uncommon this time of year in Bristol, Tennessee and Bristol, Virginia, which, for folks who don't know, literally you go down Main Street in Bristol, one side of Main Street's Virginia, one side of Main Street is Tennessee. It's kind of the craziest thing. But the track is in Tennessee, and this time in the mountains up there, it gets a little weird with the weather. So I hope we don't see the rain tires, Sean, but it's a possibility.
History does point towards the fact that we might be dealing with weather this weekend, especially because even before they went on to Bristol Dirt, I couldn't even count how many times within like about maybe a 5 to 10 year span that the Bristol concrete race in March would get delayed all the way even into Monday because of rain. It's kind of crazy how many times that happened.
I really don't understand I've said this before. I don't understand when we have so much of the season in the peak heat. And I get it gets hot in Bristol, Tennessee, but it is up in the mountains. They call it in Thunder Valley because it's down in between the mountains. And so they get some more weather than other places, say down towards Nashville or something like that. I don't know why we insist on going to Martinsville, which is also in the Appalachians. And we go to Bristol in early spring. Like it just never has made sense to me. I understand we want to split up the schedule, but it's like we know these are kind of notoriously tough times of year for weather. So why do we insist on doing it? But we could talk about that till we turn blue. It's not going to change anything. I always laugh, though, when I think of the Bristol Spring Race because I'll never forget Kurt Busch doing snow angels after his victory on the front stretch.
Oh, yeah, I remember that too. Man, that's bringing it quite back there. I believe that was one of his earlier victories at that too.
I think he was in the 97, so I believe so. But there was snow. We had a delay. If not, it may have even been delayed a day. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it was the Xfinity or truck race that got delayed. But we had a delay due to snow. And it's the only time I can remember having a delay. I mean, Michigan, we had a massive delay due to fog before. But I can't think of another time where we've had a delay due to snow.
I don't think I can think of one off the top of my head either, especially considering that most of the NASCAR season does not even race in even close to winter. So
again, I go back to why do we go to the mountains this time of year? Like that happened, and it wasn't like, hundreds of years ago or back in the 70s, So, well, I'm happy to be moving on to Bristol. I've never been a huge fan of Phoenix, to be honest with you. I hate the fact that it's our championship race. I like the fact that it's unique, but I've never been a big fan of the racing there. The restart, people enjoy it because of the restarts. And after they flip the track around and now the front stretch with the dog leg, I'll be honest, man, if we don't have those restarts, Phoenix, I don't think is any longer on the schedule. I just don't think the fandom is there.
Well, I think it's from what I've heard and read and looked at videos of, it has a very, very big fan base that's very into racing over in that area. And the facility itself is apparently very modern, one of the most modern as far as the Cup Series schedule goes. And people like going to the track environment. Really, it's just the racing that's holding it back from reaching the highest potential there. And you could say that it is attributed to the track, but it also, I do remember back in the day when Phoenix used to have some actual pretty good races, but it's changed since they paved the track over a few times. So overall, it's just quite different from back then. It's still unique, but just not exactly the same.
And you bring up a good point because one of my favorite races was always Martinsville. Also a flat track, also a short track. Mm-hmm. And those races have been stinkers lately. I mean, it was only 4 or 5 years ago that the Martinsville race that was long. It was like a 5-hour event. It was a long race by time standards and had one of the highest ratings ever for a race. We have had nothing close to that. And I wonder, Sean, is it as much the repave or is it much the struggles we've had with short track racing in general the last 2 to 5 years? I mean, some of the stinkers was because Harvick was so good, right? But you're right. Since we flopped it around, it hasn't brought the same excitement. I don't know if it's the pavement as much as it is. We've really killed short track racing, man. And there's no point in us beating this dead horse, but I wonder how much that plays into it is all.
I just think overall, I think Phoenix itself, just the layout has just not been fully 100% there, regardless of the package, because even before we went to the next gen car, some of those last few races before we went there was even kind of like, rough too. Yeah. Like the last real big moment that I can remember as far as like a finish goes was probably when it was Harvick versus Edwards, and it was a photo finish at the line.
That was a good one. That was a good one. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's been a while. Well, let's cover some of the news for this week. Why don't you lead us off here, Sean, because you pulled up some good ones. Although I'm very excited about the first one, and I can touch on that in a minute.
So first things first, let's talk about the race happening after this one for a little bit, because they did a bunch of driver announcements pretty much within the last 24 hours of some drivers that are going to be heading up and making both Cup Series and Xfinity starts at Circuit of the Americas. So let's take a look at the list here. You have Kamui Kobayashi back for 23XI Racing. Timmy Hill is driving for NBM Motorsports in the number 66, and this is notable just because that's the very first time since the next-gen car was introduced at NBM Motorsports is making a Cup Series start. And then right after that, you have Alex LeBay making a start in the number 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports. And then you have Daniil Kvyat. I may be mispronouncing that. Sorry if I am. He's driving the number 07 for SS Greenlight Racing in the Xfinity Series race. And these four drivers are all making the starts next week at Circuit of the Americas. So that's pretty interesting, pretty exciting stuff right there, Rich.
So Kobayashi has quite the illustrious career well beyond NASCAR. Kobayashi, I should have had his stats up here, Sean. I apologize. But Kobayashi has had some championships overseas. But I remember cheering him on at Indy. Being the Indy 500 geek that I am, I'm trying to remember when he did that, though. It's been a while. Maybe I'm getting him confused. I swore he had an Indy 500 start. But I'm looking forward to him. He is obviously a history of road racing. 24 Hours of Le Mans. He's had one class win. He won in 2021. Championship titles in the FIA World Endurance Championship. GP2 Asia Series, the Euro Cup Formula Renault Series, Formula Renault 2.0 Italia. He is a road racer. That is his background. He is a fun personality. He didn't have the greatest success in F1 by any means, but I'm excited to see him hop in a Cup car again. He did race.
This is his second start too in the Cup Series. Let's not forget.
Yeah. He did run at the Brickyard on the road course,
where him and Ricky Stenhouse got into it a couple times.
Yeah, but I like Ricky, but who hasn't Ricky gotten it into? I mean, he's kind of had his fair share. And I really do. I've met Ricky. He used to race go-karts with my family. Ricky and his whole family are just wonderful people. I cannot speak high enough about him. I know people like to call him Ricky Wreckhouse and all that.
Ricky Spinhouse.
Really Ricky Spinhouse. Recky Spinhouse. That's what it was. Recky Spinhouse.
Yeah.
That's not really my jam. He was fun to watch back in the karts. And, look, I think people lose sight sometimes that we really are talking about a handful of the very best drivers in the world. There's only 36 weekly Cup rides out there. And we don't even have full-time rides in all 36. And this is the upper echelon here. And I get it's here and not the world, but not many parts of the world run ovals like we do here. And there's a lot of local short tracks, dirt and paved. They're all ovals and things of that nature. So, I don't really fault him for that, but Kobayashi's been all over, and I was wrong on Indy. I'm getting him confused with Sato. Ooh, that's pretty rough. My bad. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see, because I think the 23XI team will have a fast enough car. And look, it's kind of like when we talked earlier in the year about Boris Said. Same kind of concept, in my opinion. He's a heck of a wheelman with both feet and turn in both directions. So I'm curious to see what that 23XI car looks like.
Yeah, and it's another one of those teams that's going to have just the third car for just that race, because I believe Trackhouse is going to have SVG in that week too.
Yep. So in addition to all those changes, we got an update after the whole Dale Jr. news, which, my gosh, how slow is news cycles that we have to have Junior come out and talk about that he wasn't reprimanded or yelled at or whatever words they were using about how he was doing things or having him in the booth or not. Like, I don't know what happened behind the scenes. Look, Amazon has hired some really great talent, so they're clearly willing to throw money at people and either have a good group behind the scenes as far as producers that are, that these folks want to work with or something. But this whole weird nonsense with all this background is kind of crazy. But it came out that Lee Diffie will be calling some of the Cup races on NBC after the Olympic break this year.
Yep.
I don't know how many people remember, but Lee called some races in the past at the Cup.
He has. He definitely has, and he's called races alongside Dale Jarrett before. So there you go.
His claim to fame is mostly F1, though, right? I mean, that's where
IndyCar.
He did the bulk of his work, or IndyCar. My apologies.
IndyCar and the WeatherTech Sports Car Championships.
That's right. Look, he's fine. I can't lie, though, Sean. I really struggle with the Australian accent in the NASCAR booth. I know people might want to call me racist or whatever. That's fine. It's really odd to me as someone who's grown up watching this sport since I was like 5 years old. I get it. People can be students of sports and get involved, and he's watched a lot of racing. I mean, he's called more races than I probably have watched live, right? I mean, he's, as you mentioned, the 2 other series he's in. So it's not like he doesn't know what he's doing, but it's not like this guy has a history of any oval racing or the NASCAR or history behind the cars. Like, I don't understand people that really take the hate out on Mike Joy. I think he is a gem. I think we should appreciate. I don't think people understand how knowledgeable he is on cars and his ability to recall history and how long he's been around, not just our sport, NASCAR, but others. I like Alan Bestwick. Whatever. It is what it is. I'm just not a huge fan of the call, to be honest with you. But I don't get a choice, and I can always hit mute.
Well, I mean, I'm not against this decision by any means. I think Diffie is a fine enough commentator as it is, and seeing him with Jeff Burton and Steve Letarte should be very interesting because I don't believe he's worked much with either of those two guys. But for those that are still interested in Rick Allen, he's still going to do all the Cup races up until the Olympics break, and he's still going to be calling all the Xfinity Series races. But still, because I have not seen where exactly is the reasoning behind the change fully, other than I'm guessing just NBC wanted to try something different for why Allen is just pretty much out after the Olympic breaks in the Cup Series booth, though.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not trying to knock him, but it does take it away from me, man. I won't lie, man. I will either mute or turn on the radio. Like, it's just not my jam. And honestly, part of that's Burton and Letarte too. I can hand Letarte to a degree. I'm over Burton at this point. I really am.
They do bring knowledge. I will give him credit where credit is due, especially with Letarte because of his experience as a crew chief. And I like that aspect of it.
But I think they both have been so far removed. I don't think I don't think he has any current connection. Larry Mack makes it a point to get in the garage and wants to be in the box and wants to keep doing things to be relevant and on top of it. Other than Jeff running his mouth, I don't know. I really don't know, man. And I've never been a huge fan of his anyway. And so maybe I'm just biased. Letarte, he's fine. I hope he stays kind of up to date. I'd rather have Larry Mack, but they're not all going to work for the same, companies and all that, but it is what it is. Look, you've heard me bash the TV coverage from both of the main partners. So hopefully it gets better, as we go into next year with it. I hate that it's so split up, but maybe Amazon hits it out of the park as far as coverage, Sean. Their football coverage was good. They're doing the right things. Although I'll be honest, man, I don't know that I like Junior in the booth. I think small samplings of Junior is a much better than a nonstop Junior in the booth. He is like me. I don't think me in the booth would be good. I'm too excitable. And man, that guy just sounds like he's screaming all the time.
Well, it's because also too, Junior's actually watching the live action on the track rather than relying on the cameras like most of the other commentators. So some people online call it the Dale Jr. jump scare when he suddenly announces, "Oh, there's a crash out there." But
well, why don't you touch on that?
Just as excitement there.
why don't you touch on that a little more? Because that was some of the backstory behind the whole NBC News thing, right? Was that they did not like that Junior was watching things that weren't on the screen. He was watching the track, and that was part of the reprimand.
As far as I know, actually, Junior did. I believe he came out and said that I don't think that was NBC that did that to him. I think it might have been a different network because he said nothing but good things about NBC, pretty much.
Okay. But I had read somewhere that was, because he would say things and it's not on the screen, and they felt like there was some sort of disconnect there and so on. But yeah, he definitely has he has sort of the, what do you call it? The MO, I guess, he's kind of known for that. So, Well, why don't you hit us with your favorite paint schemes of the week, Sean?
All right, paint scheme spotlight time. Let's get on into it. The first one that I am going to want to talk about is Ross Chastain's Busch Light fishing scheme. This scheme here is a completely new scheme. I mean, Ross, has the Busch Light sponsorship this year, which he inherited from Kevin Harvick. And this fishing scheme, it looks really, really cool. The white, the mix of the blues, it's got the Busch Light colors pretty much on it. And then the way the fish just pops out in the middle, and the number is just slotted in very nicely. Good usage of the sponsor space. I just really love how this looks, Rich. It looks like so cool. It's like taking a boat out onto the track or giving that beach experience and just putting it right there, or maybe not beach is the right word, like the lake experience. There you go.
We're so old, Sean. These schemes would never have been possible in our childhood, right? Because now we're doing wraps. And what is really catching my eye is the detail on the fish, and to the between the front wheel and the one, all that. I hope we get a good close-up view on the cameras, because the intricate work, I think, and because I believe that's the same image that's on their cans that they've got. This is a really well done decal, wrap, paint scheme, however you want to say it. We never would have seen anything this intricate growing up, man. This bravo, dude. I mean, like I told you, I'm not a big Busch Light fan. I don't fish. I really enjoy this paint scheme. This is really well done.
Yeah, it's just so well done that it just transcends even past the casual interest of the sponsor or the imagery. It's just really, really clean.
They did a great use of the extra space that NASCAR gave them by moving the one or the number. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like they're using that. You can't take your eye off the fish, and then the next thing you see is Busch Light. You can't. Like, it's almost impossible to see one without the other. Just hat tip to everybody who was involved with that one.
Very much so. All right, then let's get into the next paint scheme here, which is the Ty Gibbs Sirius XM scheme. This is a completely brand new scheme that is being driven this week. We've seen the Sirius XM schemes for some of the Toyota cars before, like with 2311 with Tyler Reddick, or the 20 car with Christopher Bell. But now we got Ty Gibbs here and with the Sirius XM scheme. I really like how this one looks with the white and the blue particularly meshing very well. That's the Sirius XM colors right there. And even for the S on the front of the hood, they have the star icon mixed in and meshing very well with the colors too. It gives a pretty nice contrast and makes it pop. And overall, I really like this scheme a lot. What do you think, Rich?
I like it. You know me, I also get attached to the sponsors. I like the sponsor, right? I think it's cool that SiriusXM is on a car. I love that they got the new logo on the hood. I think this looks way sharper than the old car they used to, the paint schemes from the other cars when they sponsored. The great use of the 54 to highlight that 4 in the white with the blue behind it, and the way they, and then Monster, how they just had that hint of black in there for Monster. They did a great job on this.
Oh, yeah. I actually, I know sometimes when Ty Gibbs or some of the other Toyotas, like with Reddick there, for example, when they mix and match different sponsors, they always have that little corner where it's like showing the Monster logo or some other sponsor, and it's like a big contrast to the color overall. But I honestly don't mind it as much here. I think it's just like a nice enough contrast, that, especially with it being next to the fuel canister there. I think that kind of helps it along too. that I kind of just overall, I don't mind it. I really
Well,
like
there's
it
some
overall.
subtle black accents in other parts of the scheme, right? On the nose and near the fender and the splitter and stuff. And so I feel like it's, to your point, it's really subtle, but the way it mixes in underneath that blue like that, it looks like it's very fitting, you know?
Indeed. So how about we talk about your paint scheme of the week? Oh, wait. Wasn't this one of your choices anyway, Rich?
This one was, Sean and I were talking about it off air. To be honest, the two Sean picked were right at the top, the ones I was looking at. I really had liked both these schemes. If I was forced, because I only had one because I felt we had overlap, I'd probably go with Ty Gibbs over Ross's. I just like the simpler, cleaner look, the blue and the black and the white. But otherwise, look, you know me, Sean. I can't get away from orange, dude. I can't get away from orange. If you had an orange car with the 01 on it, I'd cheer for it too. So the Hawaiian bun scheme is back. I should probably find a Brad Keselowski Hawaiian bun hat or shirt or something, because I really do. It's my kind of orange, man, and I love those Hawaiian buns. The wife gets them when we get ham at Thanksgiving. She always gets the Hawaiian buns because I'll make ham sandwiches out of them. We are fans of Hawaiian buns at this house, and they do taste different in Hawaii. I don't know why, but I was told there is a reason, but I don't know why.
Well, the thing is that's also interesting about this scheme is this is not the first time this season that we've seen the Kings Hawaiian scheme, as it did appear back a couple races ago at Atlanta Motor Speedway with this picture here. So you can see how it looks right on the track in action there. And what do you think? Seeing it on the render here versus on the actual track, what do you think about the differences in how it looks?
I think the on the track looks better. If I could make one recommendation to RFK, the gold flaking there at the bottom under Hawaiian, I would make that 6 that same gold flaky color.
I could see that. Yeah, that would be a pretty nice and interesting look.
Just because you almost have like two metallics going on there, right? Like the silverish and then the gold. And I just think it would look cleaner if it was the same. But I think the on the track car looks better than the artist renderings.
Yes. Overall, pretty clean scheme. I like that one a lot too. Definitely is higher up for me as far as some of my choices go. But I wanted to also make sure to spotlight some new schemes whenever we get them too.
So the thing about Bristol, it's going to be a lot. Well, we saw it at Phoenix too, right, Sean? In Las Vegas, dominators, right? We gotta make sure we gotta find them dominators for DFS. What are your thoughts on targeting drivers that look? We always want to find fast drivers in the back for the cheap, easy points with place differential, right? Like it's awesome when there's a guy that's 25th and we're like they're a top 5 car, right? Like that's the chalkiest of chalk plays. That's when you're going to see 60-70% ownership, right? Mm-hmm. How is your at Phoenix? That was not a good strategy to use as a general rule, right? Would you agree with that?
Overall, I still think that dominators still mattered overall in the end at Phoenix, but it was spread about through a few drivers rather than just one or two. So, which that sometimes happens when you get towards these shorter tracks where you might just have a group of drivers that hang around towards the front, maybe dominate like a stage or so, and then somebody else kind of takes over.
Right.
But with Bristol, though, I think that's going to matter even more just because the big factor is that you have a much higher lap count to deal with than Phoenix. Phoenix has about 312 laps. Here we got 500 laps. So that right there means there's already a big difference that leans even more towards the dominator end of the spectrum when it comes towards setting DFS lineups. Place differential matters, of course, as always. But considering, too, that this track can also be kind of hard to make moves as well, too, depending on where you get in the field, that also is going to matter.
So that's kind of what I was trying to get at is because passing was such a premium at Phoenix, Austin Cindric didn't kill us in our lineups, even though he was horrible for a point standpoint, because none of those value guys that started in the back really made any headway. They didn't rack up more than 12, 15. 22 points was one of the higher scores as far as that bottom tier of guys, right? We start lapping cars. We're going to lap cars a lot faster here at Bristol. But that's what I was getting at is, when we're at places like Vegas, I'm not as worried about where a driver qualifies as long as they have speed. But when we go to Martinsville, Bristol, Phoenix, I do worry about that because I feel like it's much, much, much more difficult. Like we have seen fast cars at Bristol go a lap down early, hang around. More cars are getting lapped. Next thing you know, only 15, 16 cars are in the lead lap. But that lap car has been fairly fast. And while they've never gotten that lap back, they've continued to be somewhat involved. And you've been, you find yourself cheering them on like, oh, we're going to get a caution here. They're finally going to get on the lead lap. What do we get to see? But we've seen where fast cars like that get kind of hung out to dry because of the type of racing. And so I guess what I'm kind of asking or getting at is I'm not as worried about place differential is always nice. I'm not as worried about chasing that here or like at a place like Phoenix as I am. I mean, certainly, take the Talladegas, Daytonas off of it. But I mean, certainly even places like Charlotte, Las Vegas, Kansas, Dover, places like that where I feel like there's time. Sean, we're going to be lapping cars in what, 15 laps, 20 laps, somewhere in that ballpark?
Yeah, although it is going to depend on the overall speeds of the entire field. And I think the field is just a little more equal compared to years past in that regard. That's still going to be a big factor just because there's some of those drivers that, they're still going to get a whiff of that clean air for a little while there and still have a bit of a speed and aero advantage. Even if you don't think it's going to happen, there always is a bit of an advantage towards being out front. But it's just because this is one of the shortest tracks in the entire schedule that cars are very easily going to be lapped. And that was the case within the past two Bristol races on concrete. In fact, actually, the last race last year, September, you know how many cars ended up finishing on the lead lap there, Rich? Take a guess.
12? I'm going with 12.
Funny enough, that's the answer if I said it was 2 years ago. But it's close. But believe it or not, only the top 10 finished on the lead lap.
I knew it was somewhere in that ballpark because I hate the fact that NASCAR management likes to grade races by how many cars are on the lead lap. Yeah, I despise it. I don't think that necessarily means it's a good race. And I always laugh because people have always talked about, they ruined Bristol when they got rid of or they changed the progressive banking and all that. Bristol, we never had a bunch of cars on the lead. It is super common at Bristol. I don't care. I tell you what, Sean, go back to, I went to a race at Bristol. I don't remember if it was did I go to the spring race or was the summer? I don't know. Go back to 2008, 2009. Okay. People were loving it. Carl Edwards, Kyle Busch beating each other up, the whole deal, right? Sean, there were cars 3-4 laps down. My dad got frustrated at the track because he's like, I couldn't tell who was on the lead lap. There takes a little bit of an art to watching when it gets that way, but we've always only had 10, 12, 15 cars on the lead lap at Bristol. This is nothing new, and it used to be one of the best races every year.
In fact, actually, I looked back towards the last 5 Bristol races on concrete. Only 2 races within that span had more than 15 drivers on the lead lap finish. Only 2.
That's what I'm saying.
Within the last 5 Bristol races on concrete. This dates all the way back towards the first race in 2020.
So, again, this is where I'm saying be careful chasing. Look, if we have someone that we really like and say there are times disallowed because, I don't know, a tire cut down as they cross the start-finish line or something, okay? So we know they're fast, but they are actually starting in a qualified spot of 35th or 36th. We'll let you know that. But you got to understand there's still a fair amount of risk with those drivers because it's a very real possibility. They don't, to Sean's point about the clean air, we can debate clean air and aero downforce and all that crap. But the bottom line is that leader has a clean line. Bristol is a rhythm track. And boy, you don't have to use a lot of brake if you corner right. Those guys in the back that are too wide, they don't get that luxury. And so we may see a fast car back there, and guess what? They're just not fast to start the race because it will be too wide from the start-finish line all the way past halfway of the backstretch. That's how short this track is. So the leader is going to see the tail end of the field from about lap 5 on. They may not get to them, but as they're exiting turn 2, they're going to be seeing the field go into turn 3. Like that's going to happen. So please don't get too enamored. If we're going to chase place differential points, we need to chase top 15, top 20 starters, hoping they're top 5 guys, right? Would you agree with that as far as if we're aiming at place differential points?
Yeah, or in fact, actually, even drivers that start like, say, 30th on back just to even finish top 20 or top 15 would be considered a win for them being a part of your DFS lineup right there, Wrench.
That would be massive. If you find someone back in 30th-ish and they break inside the top 15, that is going to be a lineup breaker. I mean, either it'll be a chalky play and everyone has it, or no one's going to have them and it is going to completely mess up lineups. It's just, we're not going to see that. What we are going to see, to your point, Sean, we may see Larson, Bell, Hamlin all score within 5-6 points of each other, all be north of 70 points or more. Probably actually could be north of 80 because we have so many laps. Because, to your point, we may have someone that leads 175 laps, someone that leads 150 laps, and oh, by the way, that still leaves, what does that leave? 325? That still leaves another 175 laps that have to still be accounted for.
Just
like,
those in the last race alone there, Rich, I'm just going to bring this up, but we've had 3 drivers lead over 100 laps in the last race on concrete. 3 drivers.
Okay. Who were they?
Denny Hamlin, who won the race, led 142. He led the second most laps. Ty Gibbs led 102 laps. And the driver that ended up leading the most laps ended up finishing 3rd. And that was Christopher Bell, who led 187 laps.
And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm willing to bet Bell still outscored those other 2 drivers.
More than likely.
Just because the 3rd place finish, they're only going to be a few points behind the guy that finished first. But having that many more laps led, and we shouldn't downplay this. Chances are, if you led a bunch of laps, you probably had quite a few fastest laps too, because you are the one with the most clean line around the track. So in addition to the bonus points of leading laps, now you got the bonus points of fastest laps. And Sean, we have to hit these dominators. There's no way around it. If we're going to cash again this week, and we did last week, we pushed everybody on Bell, and he was the number 1 point scorer. We have to hit on that again this week. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Definitely, and it matters even more than last week.
Now, as far as betting strategies go, I posted some up in the article. I had a few more options. I'm trying to be better about narrowing it down, and I don't seem to be doing a good job. Part of my problem with that article is, and just like this podcast, Sean, we're doing this before practice. So we are really doing this blind. All we have is historical data, right? And recent history, right?
Yep.
The problem with that is, Sean, I don't even like the fact that you and I are having to pull data from the September night race. Like, it's a different event. The no sunlight, the heat, all those things are so much different than what we're dealing with this weekend. I really struggle with that. I liked it back in the day when we could at least look at, say, 2 races a year at Bristol, knowing one of each of those races was, whether it's the fall or the spring, would overlap with what you're researching. We don't have that right now. So there was a few more in there than I'd like to have. Look, the guys that have led here before, we're on them. We'll talk about them here shortly. But Gibbs, Bell, I really want to cheer for Reddick here, but Reddick's concrete history has not been great, Sean. So until we see practice times, I'm very timid with, I'll take a couple of shots because after getting burned on the Roger Carruth line moving, I'm willing to take a couple of shots and say, a couple bucks on Brad Keselowski, because he's a little longer at, what I say, 8, is he 1,400, I think. If you wanted to take a shot on some of these deeper guys, fine. Yeah, Bell's line could shrink to, say, 350, 250. So could Hamlin's. But I'll be honest, Sean, I would rather bet to 250 or 350 after seeing practice than I think spread out my bets over 5 or 6 guys right now.
I think that's pretty valid to say, just because, when it comes to Bristol, having a car that's going to be able to last through a long run is also going to matter too. And sometimes these teams just don't have the setup nailed. We've seen cases where some of those drivers have good history, but just don't have the right setup behind them, and then they end up doing nothing in the race. It's happened several times before, and I'm sure it's going to happen at least to some team this weekend.
It was Joey Logano last weekend.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I mean, he looked like a really solid play, and he wasn't. He was not worth the money. He wasn't. Just wasn't. And here's the other thing, guys, ladies, gentlemen. Because it's a small track, it's what we sometimes call a self-cleaning track, which doesn't make a lot of sense. What we mean by that is when there's an accident, they tend to collect everybody and just kind of wash them right down the track. So one guy, while we won't have the big one per se, one driver getting loose or squirrely can lead to 5-6 cars getting collected and just taking out that whole section of the field. We have seen this happen to leaders. We have seen this happen to cars that were on their way to win the race and dominating, and lap traffic collecting them. This happens more than we want to probably admit to ourselves. So here again, we need to look at practice, but let's not go overboard on being overly confident, because it's Bristol, baby. Anything is possible.
Truly.
We talked about the rules already. All right, so here's some notable starters for the weekend. We only have 2 races this weekend. We have the Truck Series on Saturday evening, and we have the Cup Series Sunday afternoon. So for the Truck Series, William Saul, which will be in the number 1 Tricon garage truck, he's a name to watch. He's gotten some publicity. He's done a handful of races here and there. He's shown some speed, short track background. It's good equipment. He's going to be a name to watch. I wouldn't get too crazy with it. Kyle Busch is back in the number 7 Spire Motorsports. Sean, at this rate, we're not going to see Kyle Busch in the Truck Series beyond 2 weeks from now, because he only gets 5 Truck Series races, and apparently Spire picked them for him. So we've only going to have a couple more times we're going to get to see Kyle in the Truck Series. And then
I believe he picked some of the races, and then Spire picked the others.
Oh, is that what it was? I had read that he was told what races they were, but who knows, man. That makes more sense what you're saying. And then Zane Smith is in McAllen Heigelman Racing Chevrolet. That's the teammate to Christian Eckes, Tyler Ankrum, Daniel Dye. I might be forgetting one, but point being, it's fast equipment. Zane has a truck championship, so don't be sleeping on Zane. I know he hasn't done anything much lately when we've seen him a couple times in the Truck Series, but be on the watch for his practice times, because Eckes and the rest of the McAnally Heigelman racing team has actually done quite well at this track. So for Cup, we got AJ Allmendinger. He's in the 16. He's going to be in the 16 throughout the year, on and off for Colleague Racing. So just something to keep in mind. I'm not probably overly excited. I mean, Dinger does fine at Bristol. It's not really his jam, but hey, opinion on practice speeds and qualifying.
Oh yeah, qualifying and practice is really going to matter a lot when it comes to this weekend, especially because then you could rely on the fact that those that start up front can be an early dominator for these races this weekend. There, Rich. That's going to be big too.
You said it best earlier. It's not uncommon with these longer. They're not longer because these races fly by, but with these, as many laps as we have, to have someone get out to a lead early, dominate, and kind of fade away and not really be a factor, while someone kind of mid-pack, a little further back, leads the next section, and all of a sudden the last one's dominated by one car who goes on to win the race. So I think you summarized it perfectly earlier, man, that we probably need to look for multiple dominators. We're going to have to hit on the top one. And don't be shocked and surprised if you see one dominate early and kind of fade out.
Yeah, I really think that, let's just put it this way. If a driver is going to qualify close to the front or is on the pole position and they look really good in practice, that should be a very, very big indicator that you're going to want them in your DFS lineup this weekend.
They should be a 60, 70, 80% of your lineups if that's what we're looking at. Someone starting 15th, like Bell last weekend, there was a reason we really liked him, and we're basing lineups around him. You know, he was so much faster than everybody on the consecutive lap average. It was a little bit insane. Like, I was going to be shocked if Bell didn't win that race or come close to it. Like, that's really where I was kind of at after practice and qualifying. Well, Sean, who are your top drivers to watch this week? Or top, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Top priced drivers for DFS to watch this weekend.
So the ones that I'm going to watch, and I'm just going to flat out and name all three here that I've picked for this tier to discuss: Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, Chris Buescher. Denny Hamlin, he's won at Bristol a couple times at this point. He's really good at this track. He's the most recent winner. I mentioned it earlier. He was one of those three drivers that led over 100 laps in the last Bristol race. He's going to be one to watch. And you have to remember, he also won the Clash at the Coliseum earlier this year too, as to bring up another point for a short track-based victory. Now, Christopher Bell, he won last week at Phoenix. He's been really dominant in the last two races at Concrete at Bristol. Gibbs is usually very good at this track. Got to put him on watch there. And then with Chris Buescher, he's also a former Bristol winner there too. He's been really strong in recent races at the track. Those RFK cars, they've really come along strong when it comes to recent Bristol races. He's going to be one to watch right there too.
So Sean puts this sheet together before I do. So I guess I get the luxury to know what Sean picks, and he doesn't get the luxury of seeing what I pick. I already had Hamlin, Bell, and Buescher kind of written down. That seems pretty boring to repeat it. I will hammer Bell. I can't get off of Bell. I don't like going back-to-back on drivers, but I can't. Right now, I feel like the momentum is in Bell's corner, and I will not be shocked if we see a bunch of top fives over the next month or so from Bell, especially with this new Toyota car. I think they've got it hit. Hamlin has all the numbers behind it. It's more of a gut shot I just can't seem to get warm and fuzzy on yet. So I'll throw a couple of other names out at you to take a look at. Kyle Larson, William Byron, and give me Brad Keselowski, another RFK. We're both on the RFK guys. Look, they're priced $100 or $200 apart. Qualifying's probably going to matter which one I use and which one I don't. I feel like Buescher's been a little bit better here recently, but I feel like Brad's coming on, and he's had a decent run of success here. It goes back a ways, but he and Kyle Busch both had some real, what's the word I'm looking for? They had a lot of success over a fairly large window. You know what I mean? Rattling off multiple wins over, 3 wins over a 10-year span type of thing.
Right.
So give me those kind of guys. Practice is going to be a big deal, Sean, because right now, if you held a gun to my head, I'd take your top 3 over my top 3. But after practice, I'm not so sure we'll feel the same way.
Oh yeah, this definitely can swing in an entirely different direction by the time we go through practice. I didn't mention Kyle Larson or William Byron, but both of those drivers have been very, very good at this track in recent years, Larson being a recent winner. And Larson also is, fun fact, the only driver in the past 3 Bristol races on concrete to place in the top 5 every time. So he is going to be good there too. Byron finished top 10 in all 3 of those races. Brad Keselowski has 2 top 10 finishes in the last 3 Bristol concrete races. Buescher, as we mentioned, he has a win. I mean, all these drivers have the history behind them. They have the skill set, but we need to see if the cars are up to snuff with the skill set, and that's going to matter.
100% agree. Like I said, I wanted to change it up a little bit. Sean and I will probably overlap a lot on these drivers once we see practice. Sean and I always differ a little bit, but I got to tell you, when he sees something I don't, I go back and double check because I feel like I've missed something. When we overlap, telling you folks, that's fire in a bottle. I'm just saying. The stuff we've overlapped on, we've been pretty much spot on. So just something to know. Mid-tier options. All right, hit me with your mid-tier options. I'm kind of not shocked, but I'm debating if your first one qualifies as mid-tier if he's priced low enough.
Well, as far as the mid-tier drivers are concerned, I've got Chase Elliott, Ty Gibbs, and Eric Jones. Now, Elliott, you might think just because of the name that, oh, he should be a top price pick. But the way that both DraftKings and FanDuel has him priced this week, he's around like that 8,300 range or so, which basically qualifies about mid-tier for me this week. And FanDuel, he's under 10,000. He's like 9,500. So that right there, especially when you consider the history that Elliott has, even though he hasn't been winning with the next gen car, he still has 2 top 10 finishes in the last 2 Bristol races on concrete. And if you even want to go back another 2 races behind that, he has been top 10 in 3 of the last 4 races. And Chase Elliott, you have to remember, he was the best looking Chevrolet out there last week at Phoenix, which is another short track basically as it stands there. So you have to think that maybe he's going to have a car that's capable of at least placing well enough and for the price, and especially because it's Hendrick equipment. I love it right there. I absolutely really like it this week when it comes to Elliott. Now, as for Ty Gibbs, he had a really strong performance in the last Bristol race, and I'm leaning heavily on that, as well as his really hot start to the season, especially with all those consistent finishes inside the top 10. And then as for Eric Jones, well, he's a driver that's historically been pretty solid when it comes to Bristol, and he's borderline around that price towards being a value pick there, but he's just above that fringe, I'd say. But for the price point and for the equipment, and again, Toyotas, they've been very good in recent years at Bristol, regardless of the circumstances. I have my eye on him this week.
Look, we completely overlapped. My order's a little different. I didn't put them in financial order, more how I like them. I like Ty Gibbs a lot this weekend. We saw him lead laps here in the fall race last year. I think Ty Gibbs is, if he's not a popular pick, I'll be surprised because his price point really makes him intriguing. Eric Jones is, like you said, is so close to being on that borderline of a value play. He's hard not to look at. His history here is really good. Quietly, like not setting the world on fire good, but for $7,200, this is a guy that I think you have a better than, 50-50 shot of cracking the top 10. So top 15 at least, man, I hope Chase Elliott turns it on. I want to be in on Elliott. His history here has been phenomenal. He has been so bad in this car. And yes, you're right. He's had a couple of top 10s with this car. It's about the only few top 10s he's had with this car has been here at Bristol. So he should be fine. And really, he's in Hendrick equipment, to your point, Sean, and he's kind of the cheapest out of the group, right? So it's a good way to get exposure there. I really had fun going through the sleepers and bargains, and this is an area where you and I really don't overlap much.
Yes, and it's for very interesting reasons, just because I'll be honest with you, Rich, I actually don't dislike your options either this week.
I don't dislike
especially one of them I almost consider for my own lineup there too. But the 3 that I'm going to be hitting on is Michael McDowell, Ryan Preece, and Todd Gilliland. When you go forth and look at the average finish out of all the different drivers that you consider value picks, believe it or not, within the last 3 races, those 3 have the best average finish out of all those value picks. And it's crazy when you consider that too. Especially for Ryan Preece, who I think is grossly underpriced on both sites this week. He's 5,900 on DraftKings. He's like 4,500 on FanDuel. Let me tell you this, Rich. Bristol, if you don't count the Chicago street course, Bristol is Ryan Preece's best track statistically. How is that shocked for something?
Well, he's got a short track background, and one of the things he's always taken pride in, because you heard it when he got wrecked a couple of years ago, he takes pride in his equipment. And one of the toughest things to do at both Bristol and Martinsville is keeping your equipment under you, whether it be the tire wear or the front end. So I'm not, like I said, I have got to get past my preconceived notions of Michael McDowell. That's where I'm struggling on Michael McDowell and why he seems to be a blind spot for me. He's always flashed at times, but now it feels like the equipment is much more consistent. Look, he's been good at these other places. He's good on road courses. He's good on the super speedways. there's no reason he can't be a top 10, top 15 guy weekly at these other tracks. So I've got to do a better job of that. I'm with you on Priest. I mean, he is so cheap. The only reason I didn't put him in that list is because you already had him, and I was like, he's too cheap not to. And did you know Todd Gilliland has led more laps this year than 23XI, Stuart Haas, and there's 2 other organizations combined?
And let me just bring this up about Todd Gilliland. He's two races at Bristol. He started 30th both times. He finished 16th and 18th, respectively.
That's impressive.
2 top 20 finishes.
You want to chase place differentials? Chase Todd Gilliland if he qualifies in the back. Chase Ryan Preece if he qualifies in the back. Chase Michael McDowell if he qualifies in the back. The cost, there's the risk.
I have to bring this up about Michael McDowell in particular, too. You look back towards the last 5 Bristol races. How many times has he finished inside the top 15? 4 times. And 2 of those being top 10 finishes. And even looking back towards the place differential, he's finished with positive place differential in 3 of 5 of those races.
Wow. Well, I've got a guy in my value group that, Sean, I don't care if this guy qualifies in the top 10. I'm probably using him. That's Carson Hocevar. He only has 1 race here. Okay. Now, here's something to keep in mind. In that race, he was running the same equipment that Eric Jones, who we've already mentioned, was running. He is in different equipment now. He is in Spire. That said, Spire's actually looked pretty good so far. Okay. Hocevar did what you said he was going to do last weekend. When I said I was a little nervous about his qualifying spot and avoided him, he scored enough points because of where he finished, regardless of where he qualified. They were very close. He got her done. And that was a track that was hard to pass, was difficult. We saw, Joey Logano struggle. I keep going back to that. Look, Hocevar was really good in this event last year, and he's been good here in the trucks. He is silly priced. He was priced higher last week, I believe. He's silly priced. I can't get away from Hocevar, Noah Gragson, or John Hunter Nemechek. John Hunter Nemechek's more of a gut shot, but he keeps showing up in the top 15 for some reason, man.
Yeah, you just have to overall like these drivers. Gragson has been kind of outperforming the expectations that we've been setting for him this season, just within, again, Stuart Haas Racing. And, I think Stuart Haas has found something when it comes to these shorter tracks, especially when you consider, we mentioned it, Priest before. He's finished top 15 in both of the last 2 races that he's driven at Bristol, which is pretty impressive in its own right. And Gragson, he's been showing some top 10 runs this year, and he's been finishing around the top 15 other times. He's just been really, really good. And as for John Hunter, it is very qualifying dependent for him, but he's finished with positive place differential in 3 of the 4 races this year. So you have to like that about him too.
And he is in equipment that is the same as Eric Jones, that Hocevar was in last year. So that was also something that kind of drew me that direction. Did you see Noah Gragson's quote this week by chance?
I'm not sure if I caught that one. Probably not.
I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't want to butcher it, but they were asking him about his quality or how well he's been finishing. And he basically said, it's been a lot of fun driving cars that are actually fast.
Okay, I did see that one. Yeah, I did see that. I just wasn't sure if he said anything else on top of that.
No, yeah, that was the one. I figured you probably had, but yeah, that was the one. So I don't have any other bets to acknowledge. There's some in the article. Please go to fantasyguru.com. The podcast here is available a part of the Elite Plus network, but our articles, the Discord, the DFS, all that stuff is on over there at fantasyguru.com. At the top, if you go to fantasyguru.com, there's a banner at the top. There's one for March Madness. If you wait a quick second, there'll be one for Game Time MVP. Sign up. You'll get all our content there. I've got some bets there, but as I noted in the article, I'm a little more wishy-washy my bets this week prior to practice. It's a lot of unknowns, and I'm not going to sit here and just blindly guess and tell you guys it's not a blind guess. So couple of top fives I was eyeballing. It's some of the longer odd folks like the Brad Keselowskis of the world and going further back, but feel free to check those out. I don't think we really need to cover any more of those. We will have a full write-up. Both of us will have a full write-up for you on bets in Discord for Cup. I for sure will on trucks. Sean usually throws in a little something here and there when the Xfinity's not going on, and don't sleep on Sean's bets is all I'm saying. But beyond that, we'll have you covered there. So let's go ahead and cover our core four. Well, here's our core four bets to win. We'll do that first. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me. So let's get on into it here. So as far as my core four betting winners are concerned, I have Christopher Bell at plus 500, Denny Hamlin at plus 550, Ty Gibbs at plus 1,200, and then my long shot winner is Michael McDowell at plus 6,000. But there's also one honorable mention I have to just throw it out there too, just because the odds are that deep. But Ryan Preece at plus 15,000. He's 150 to 1 to win. And remember, this is his best statistical track. So just saying, Sean, you may want to throw a buck on it.
I was going to say, I may seriously consider a buck on McDowell and a buck on Preece. I mean, it literally $1 pays 60, $1 pays 150. I mean, I've gambled on sillier stuff. So I really like those calls. My core four, there was a lot of overlap. I tried to pivot slightly. Look, I'm all for Bell. He was my first go-to. I'm on Gibbs ahead of Hamlin right now just because I like the longer odds. And for some reason, it's a funny knot in my stomach. I can't seem to get into on Hamlin. I like Brad Keselowski at 1,400. Like I said, I don't disagree with the Hamlin bet at plus 500. I just can't seem to embrace it. I would rather not bet on Hamlin and throw a buck on Preece and throw a buck on McDowell and pray to the NASCAR gods.
Yeah, especially with how chaotic this race can get too, because all it takes is you get some of those drivers up front that are the favorites wrecking, and boom, this race is wide open.
Big time. And look, in addition to the 6,000 to win and plus 15,000 to win, strongly consider, if you can find them, because not all books have them, check for a top 10 bet. You could get a top 10 on either of these guys, say like McDowell, maybe you can get a top 10 at plus 300. Preece, you're probably looking at a top 10 more like plus 750. Look for something like that. I don't know if I'd chase Preece for a top 5, but McDowell, I might throw another buck or so on a McDowell top 5. For a top 5, you're probably looking at probably just short of plus 1,000 is my guess, somewhere in that ballpark. So keep in mind, we don't have access to what everybody has for books. What we give you is kind of like a generic number here. Feel free to hit us up in Discord. But my wife says it best. She goes, whenever you pick guys you like to win, she goes, I should just start betting the top 5s. Because we have a knack of getting these guys in the top 5 and weird things happening. Like, Justin Allgaier was about to ruin my Chandler Smith day. Thank goodness for me, he blew a tire. I rode up all over the place. The numbers back up Allgaier. I just couldn't seem to get warm and fuzzy on it. I am not Nostradamus, but I got lucky with the warm and fuzzy feeling because the poor guy blew a tire with 10 laps to go. So just something to keep in mind. Well, let's cover our DFS core here, Sean. I'm really digging your core here, so lay it on me, bud.
So the core for this week, it's going to be the same through both sites. But I've got Denny Hamlin leading it off, 11,200 on DraftKings, 13,500 on FanDuel. He's the second most expensive driver on both sites. Then you have Chris Buescher. He's at 9,800 on DraftKings and then 11,000 on FanDuel. I especially like the price on him with FanDuel. Chase Elliott, 8,300 on DraftKings, 9,500 on FanDuel. That price is too great for me to ignore, especially considering the Bristol history there. And then rounding it out, Ryan Preece, 5,900 on DraftKings, 4,500 on FanDuel. Grossly underpriced.
So cheap. So Sean and I have a lot of overlap right now. I went with two different lineups, though, because I had two different approaches. So on DraftKings, I'm looking at Bell also at 11th, or not also. Sean was looking at Hamlin. I pivoted to Bell at 11,000. I can't get away from Hosevart 5,800. At 5,800, I just can't. I guess if he qualifies in the top 5, maybe it's a bad risk because it'll be contrarian at that point, Sean. But my gosh, at 5,800, he seems like such a value on DraftKings.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Jones at 7,200. Brad Keselowski at 9,200. I'll probably pivot from this a little bit come Sunday. My goal here, though, is to leave you enough points to get a little creative that you could maybe go chase Hamlin to put with Bell and still go get somebody, maybe a Priest or even a tier up. On FanDuel, I can't get away from Zane Smith at $2,500, Sean. At $2,500, I just want the guy to finish 20th. You know, I mean, even if he qualifies 20th and finishes 20th, at $2,500, that is a steal, okay? If you go with Zane Smith at $2,500, you could easily pivot away from Hocevar at $6,500 because there's some other lower options like Ryan Preece. You can go with Bell. You can go with Bell and Hamlin and still have enough money left over to get Kyle Larson, who is the highest price driver on FanDuel, and have $500 left over. So what I'm saying here is if you get Zane Smith in your lineup and you're willing to get, creative with one of the other values, and you can even step up that value, you can top load your lineup on FanDuel and chase those nominators. I mean, if you think about it, if Hamlin and Larson end up being dominators, Sean, that's going to be well, FanDuel doesn't do dominators though, do they?
No, they do. It's just the point values are a little bit different.
That's right. They don't do fastest laps, but they give you more per lap led, right?
It's laps completed is the big difference there.
That's right.
FanDuel counts that, but DraftKings does not.
Does not, right. So, I don't know. I wanted to top load the lineup. I'll be honest, guys, I haven't played a ton on FanDuel, so if you're going to lean on somebody's FanDuel knowledge, don't make it me, make it Sean. I've been having a lot more success lately with DK. I've changed my mode of thinking on DK where I'm stopping chasing positions and I'm chasing points. Knock on wood. So far, it's kind of worked. We have really hit on the top score, I think, for the last 3 weeks. Shoot, Sean, we may have hit on Daytona too. I don't know. But I'm pretty confident for the last 3 weeks, we have hit the top score in our write-ups, in our recommendations. So we're trying to ride that momentum. We're going to keep that going. But feel free to lean on Sean for FanDuel. I'm not the best outlet for FanDuel. I need to start doing more. Sean's recommended it. I'm trying. I finally got the account going. So I'm partway there, right? But well, that's about it. Sean, man, I love it when our stuff overlaps, dude. I'm just saying.
It's always fun when it does.
We don't, people probably don't realize this, but we don't really converse with each other about these things until we get together after we do our own research and get our thoughts on paper. Like, this is not you copying me copying you. This is, here's Sean's info. This is Rich's info. Oh, by the way, they overlap a lot. There's probably a reason why.
Mm-hmm. Usually because we make the same sorts of conclusions and agree, like, all right, this is what we like. We're throwing it out there. Oh, other person likes it. It's got to be good. This validates me.
Well, I would argue, Sean, we also know how to look at the right numbers.
Yeah.
You and I talked a while back. Neither of us really gives much of a hoot about driver rating, right? What we do give a hoot about is finishes, top 10s, top 15s, top 5s. What we do give a hoot about is practice times. What we do care about is their overall history, especially recent history, right? We care about fast laps, percent of laps in the top 15, average finishes, average running order. These are the things you and I both agree on and like to look at. So I'm not shocked that we come to similar conclusions. To be honest, I'm not shocked that we come to a lot of overlapping good conclusions. So I know I'm tooting our horn here a little bit, but I got to be frank with everybody. We've been off to a really good start. We have been very good about predicting the winners and calling them. Long odds, short odds, we've hit them. We have seen plenty of people hit in DFS. I don't know about you, Sean, but I'm up already this year on DFS. I'm up about 50%. I just looked, or 40%. I'm up 40% so far this year. That's a lot for me. I normally am not. I think being up 20% is a good thing, So
indeed,
we're going to hit cold streaks. We're going to hit hot streaks. It's going to happen, but we do know our stuff. Go to fantasyguru.com, sign up for Game Time MVP, pay the $75 for 12 months. You'll have all this covered and then some. You think it's fun to talk NASCAR with me and Sean? Go talk some other things with, like, Finsty, Ray, Jeff's in there talking basketball. Just saying, you want to talk to all Pappy Mans, you need to get into Discord, and he's hanging out in the NBA room these days. So just saying, good way to check it out. MVP all-in Game Time, $74.99, fantasyguru.com. Sean, what do you got for him? Take us out of here, bud.
Well, we're going to make sure to give the people what they want this weekend and give them the bets, give them the DFS, get them the info, the knowledge. We're going to try to make some winners this weekend in Thunder Valley. We're the RaceGuru Thunder Hour. We're thundering our way through. We're going to have some electrifying success. That's the goal.
For RaceGuru Thunder Hour, be sure to check out Sean's article. Will be dropping Sunday for I'll have an article for you Saturday. So, Engel, I'm Rich Maletto. Thanks for tuning in. RaceGuru Thunder Hour. Till next time.